Hi, welcome to our channel, Programming of Mind, where we accelerate your knowledge with concise, from high-value book summaries. Let's begin the need for space. Mars and Venus in solitude. Why do men and women need space differently? Space, physical and emotional, is essential in any relationship, but the need for space often plays out very differently for men and women. While it's often assumed that the desire for solitude in a relationship is a sign of disconnection, in reality, the need for space is a natural, healthy part of maintaining balance and individual identity within a partnership. For men, space is often an integral part of how they recharge and process their thoughts. Think of David and Natalie. After a long, stressful week, David craves solitude. He might retreat to his garage, take a long walk, or spend time alone watching his favorite shows. For David, these moments of solitude help him reset emotionally and mentally so he can reconnect with Natalie in a healthy, balanced way. Natalie, however, may feel rejected when David seeks space. To her, it may feel like he is distancing himself emotionally. She might wonder if she's done something wrong or if he's pulling away from the relationship. This can lead to unnecessary worry and misunderstandings, especially if she doesn't understand that David's need for space is not a reflection of his feelings toward her. Men's need for solitude. Recharging and recentering for many men. The need for space is deeply tied to how they process stress. Men are often conditioned to handle emotions internally. They don't always seek emotional validation in the same way women do, but rather, they prefer to deal with their feelings in private. When they take time to themselves, it's not about avoiding the relationship. It's about gaining the emotional clarity they need to engage in the relationship in a more meaningful way. Consider a situation with John and Claire. John has had a particularly grueling week at work and has come home feeling mentally drained. Claire, who had a busy week herself, wants to talk about her day and catch up. However, John feels overwhelmed and needs some time to unwind in silence. Claire might feel hurt and think that John is shutting her out, but in reality, John's need for space is simply his way of regaining his emotional equilibrium. When John takes the time he needs to recharge, he returns to Claire feeling more engaged and ready to connect. Understanding this cycle is crucial for women. Recognizing that a man's desire for space is often about self-care and mental reset, not a reflection of a lack of interest in the relationship. Women's need for connection. Emotional reassurance in contrast, women tend to find solace in emotional connection. For many women, spending time with their partner, talking about their feelings, and being emotionally available to each other provide a sense of security and well-being. When a woman feels stressed or overwhelmed, she may seek closeness, conversation, or even physical touch as a way to soothe herself. Let's take Sarah and James as an example. After a busy week, Sarah feels emotionally drained and turns to James for comfort. She wants to talk about her week, share her frustrations, and feel understood. But James, who is also stressed, may want some alone time to process his own thoughts. Sarah may feel rejected and frustrated, interpreting James' need for space as a lack of emotional support. The key here is for James to recognize that Sarah's need for emotional connection is not about dependence, but rather a way of seeking reassurance and nurturing the bond between them. Similarly, Sarah can learn that James needs space to recharge, and that his withdrawal isn't a sign of disconnection from her, but a personal need for emotional recovery. The cycle of space and closeness. How to navigate differences. The ebb and flow of space and closeness is an ongoing cycle in many relationships. Couples often go through periods of intense emotional connection, followed by times when one partner needs space to recharge. The challenge is recognizing these rhythms and adapting to each other's needs with patience and understanding. Take the relationship of Ella and Mark. Ella values frequent communication and connection, especially during stressful times, while Mark prefers to retreat to his own space when he feels overwhelmed. At first, this created tension. Ella felt disconnected and anxious when Mark withdrew, and Mark felt suffocated by the constant need for attention and conversation. However, once they discussed their different needs, they found a balance. Mark agreed to spend time with Ella when she needed connection, but he also communicated his need for solitude, assuring Ella that it wasn't a reflection of his feelings for her. Ella, in turn, understood that Mark's retreat wasn't personal, and she learned to give him the space he needed to recharge. By acknowledging these differences and finding compromise, Ella and Mark learned to create a relationship that was flexible and supportive of both their needs. Recognizing the importance of space as a form of self-care, rather than a sign of emotional withdrawal, allowed them to navigate conflicts and misunderstandings more effectively. Respecting the need for space. Not taking it personally, one of the most common sources of tension in relationships is when one partner feels personally rejected because the other seeks space. For women, especially, it can be difficult to understand why a man would need time alone when the relationship is under stress. This can trigger feelings of insecurity, leading to doubts about the relationship itself. For example, when Mary and Ben have a disagreement, Ben might retreat to his office, needing time to cool off and think things through. Mary, feeling upset and wanting resolution, might interpret Ben's withdrawal as avoidance or disinterest. However, Ben's need for space isn't about avoiding the issue. It's about managing his emotions before he can engage in a productive discussion. Mary needs to recognize that Ben's retreat is a healthy coping mechanism and doesn't necessarily indicate emotional withdrawal from her. Ben, in turn, can reassure Mary by explaining that his need for space isn't about rejecting her, but rather about calming his emotions so that he can approach the situation in a more constructive way. How to provide space without feeling disconnected while giving space is essential. It's also crucial to maintain a sense of emotional connection. Providing space in a way that doesn't lead to emotional isolation requires clear communication. Partners need to understand that seeking space doesn't mean the relationship is in trouble. It's simply a temporary step to restore balance and clarity. Take the example of Natalie and Eric. After an argument, Natalie feels overwhelmed and needs some time to herself. Instead of disappearing without explanation, she lets Eric know that she needs space to process her emotions. She assures him that she loves him and that the space is necessary for her to return to the conversation with a clear mind. Eric, understanding Natalie's need for space, respects her request, but checks in with her to ensure she's okay. This communication creates a sense of emotional safety, as both partners know that the need for space is temporary and won't lead to long-term disconnection. By openly discussing the need for solitude and reconnection, couples can ensure that both partners feel secure, supported, and respected. Learning to ask for space respectfully, it's not just about giving space, but also about learning how to ask for it in a way that doesn't cause hurt or resentment. The way a person asks for space can make a huge difference in how the request is received. For instance, when Susan feels like she needs a break, she could say to Mike, "I've had a tough day, and I need some time to myself to recharge. Let's talk in a bit. I just need a few minutes." Instead of saying something like, "I don't want to talk to you right now," Susan frames her request for space in a way that doesn't make Mike feel rejected, and it gives him clarity on what she needs. Similarly, Mike could request space by saying, "I need a little time to think. I'll be back in an hour, and we can continue our conversation then." By setting expectations and offering reassurance, both partners can avoid feeling abandoned or ignored when space is needed. Respecting the individual while staying connected in a relationship, respecting each other's need for space doesn't mean growing apart. Rather, it means maintaining individual identities while also nurturing the bond between the two people. Understanding the rhythms of connection and solitude allows couples to be more supportive of each other's emotional needs. When Lucy and Jack got married, they were both surprised by the amount of space they each needed to feel balanced. Lucy was accustomed to being close to her partner constantly, while Jack, a more introverted person, often required long periods of alone time to feel centered. Over time, they came to realize that they both had different approaches to emotional well-being, and they needed to respect those differences. Jack would retreat to his study to read or work on personal projects, while Lucy would go for walks with friends or engage in solo hobbies. However, they also made a point of coming together to reconnect at the end of each day, whether through a shared meal, a conversation, or simply spending time together in quiet companionship. This balance of space and connection helped them nurture both their individual needs and their partnership. Thank you for listening, and please like the video and subscribe for more great upcoming content that will put you in top 1% people in the world.